In a small town called Clearwater, Mississippi, life moved at a slow and steady pace. The streets were lined with old oak trees, their branches stretching wide like welcoming arms. People knew each other by name, and kids rode their bikes freely through the neighborhood without a care in the world. It was the kind of place where everyone felt safe. Until one day, everything changed. It all started on an unusually warm October afternoon in 1997. A young boy who loved to explore and laugh lived in this town. He had a big smile that could light up any room, and his curiosity about the world around him made him stand out. That day, he decided to ride his bike to the local corner store, something he'd done countless times before. His mom waved goodbye as he pedaled off, completely unaware that it would be the last time she saw her son. The boy's journey to the store should have taken only 10 minutes, but when those 10 minutes stretched into an hour, then 2, his mom began to worry. She stepped outside, scanning the empty street for any sign of him. Her heart sank as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the quiet town. By nightfall, panic set in. She called neighbors, friends, and family members, asking if anyone had seen her child. No one had. Word spread quickly in Clearwater, and soon the entire community came together to search for the missing boy. Flyers with his picture were printed and posted everywhere, on lampposts, grocery store windows, and even taped to car windshields. Volunteers formed groups, combing every inch of the town and surrounding woods. They shouted his name, hoping to hear a response, but there was nothing. Just silence. Law enforcement joined the effort, bringing in dogs trained to track scents, and organizing grid searches. Helicopters buzzed overhead, scanning the dense forest nearby. Every possible lead was followed, no matter how small or unlikely. But despite all these efforts, the boy seemed to have vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no trace of him. As the days dragged on, theories began to swirl among the townspeople. Some thought he might have wandered too far and gotten lost in the woods. Others whispered about darker possibilities, that someone had taken him. The uncertainty gnawed at everyone, especially his mother. She barely slept or ate, consumed by worry and guilt. What if she had stopped him from going to the store? What if she had walked with him instead? These questions haunted her every waking moment. The boy's disappearance left a gaping hole in the heart of Clearwater. Friends and classmates missed his laughter and energy. Teachers noticed the empty desk where he used to sit, and neighbors felt the absence of his cheerful waves as he rode past their homes. The once close-knit community struggled to come to terms with what had happened. Conversations grew quieter, smiles faded, and fear crept into places where it had never been before. Time marched on, but the mystery remained unsolved. Years passed, and the case grew colder. New families moved into town, and younger generations heard about the boy only through stories shared by older residents. For some, it became a cautionary tale told to children. Be careful when you go out. Remember what happened. For others, it was a painful reminder of unanswered questions and unfinished business. But even as the years went by, the boy's mother refused to give up hope. She kept a box filled with mementos, photos, drawings, and little notes he had written. On quiet evenings, she would sit alone in her living room, holding on to these pieces of her son's life. Sometimes she imagined him growing up, graduating from school, starting a family of his own. Other times she allowed herself to cry, letting the weight of her loss wash over her. Yet deep down, she held on to a sliver of faith that someday, somehow the truth would come to light. Clearwater may have moved forward, but the memory of the boy lingered like a ghost. It hovered over playgrounds, echoed through empty halls, and lingered in the rustling leaves of the forest. And though no one dared to say it aloud, many wondered if the answers they sought were closer than they realized, hidden just beyond sight, waiting to be uncovered. Little did anyone know, decades later, a chance discovery would bring the past crashing back into focus. Someone would stumble upon something buried deep in the woods, something that would reignite the search for truth and justice. Until then, the boy's story remained frozen in time, a puzzle missing its final piece, a chapter left unwritten. Years rolled by, and Clearwater slowly adapted to life without answers. The boy's disappearance became one of those stories people talked about in hushed tones, something too painful to forget, but too heavy to dwell on for long. Life moved forward, as it always does, but the shadow of that October day lingered. Parents held their kids a little tighter when they left the house. Neighbors exchanged wary glances whenever someone new moved into town. And though the search had ended years ago, the ache of not knowing remained. Fast forward to 2020, more than 2 decades after the boy vanished. The world was different now. Phones were smarter, cars drove themselves, almost, and everyone seemed glued to screens instead of looking up at the sky. But some things stayed the same. The woods outside Clearwater still stretched endlessly, thick with trees and secrets. It was here, in this quiet corner of nature, that something extraordinary happened. A man named Daniel Harper loved spending his weekends outdoors. He wasn't an adventurer or anything flashy like that. He just enjoyed being away from the noise of the city. A history buff at heart, Daniel often wandered through forgotten trails, searching for relics of the past. Old coins, rusty tools, shards of pottery, anything that told a story. To him, these objects weren't junk. They were pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. One crisp Saturday morning, Daniel packed his usual gear: a small shovel, gloves, and a notebook for jotting down interesting finds. He set out early, heading toward a part of the forest he hadn't explored before. The air smelled fresh, mixed with the earthy scent of damp leaves. Birds chirped overhead, and sunlight filtered through the canopy above, painting golden patterns on the ground. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of modern life. As Daniel walked deeper into the woods, he noticed something unusual near the base of a massive oak tree. Its gnarled roots twisted outward like ancient fingers clutching the soil. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than dirt and rocks, but something caught his eye: a faint glint of metal peeking through the layers of moss and mud. Curious, Daniel knelt down and began brushing away the debris. What he uncovered sent chills running down his spine. Buried beneath years of decay was a rusted metal box, its edges worn smooth by time. It looked old, like it had been there for decades. Daniel hesitated for a moment, unsure whether he should open it. There was something eerie about finding something so deliberately hidden in such a remote spot. Still, curiosity got the better way. Carefully, he pried the lid open. Inside, he found a jumble of items that seemed out of place in the middle of nowhere. A tattered journal with yellowed pages, faded photographs curled at the edges, and a few personal belongings: a toy car, a tarnished bicycle chain, and what appeared to be a broken keychain. The objects looked like they belonged to a child, but it was the writing on the inside cover of the journal that made Daniel's breath catch in his throat. Scrawled in shaky handwriting were words that felt both innocent and haunting. "This is my book. If you find this, please tell my mom I tried." Below the message was a name, simple yet unforgettable. Though Daniel didn't recognize it immediately, the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This was the name of the boy who had disappeared all those years ago. The boy whose story had haunted Clearwater for over 2 decades. Daniel sat back on his heels, staring at the box in disbelief. His mind raced with questions. How did this end up here? Who buried it? And most importantly, what did it mean? For a moment, he considered leaving everything untouched and calling the authorities right away. But then he flipped open the journal and started reading the first page. What he saw chilled him to the bone. The entries were written in a child's voice, full of fear, confusion, and desperation. They described events that painted a horrifying picture. The boy wrote about being tricked, taken somewhere against his will, and kept in a dark, scary place. He talked about trying to escape, about hiding things so someone might find them someday. Each word felt like a cry for help frozen in time. Daniel knew he couldn't keep this discovery to himself. Trembling, he snapped pictures of the box and its contents with his phone. Then, he carefully gathered everything back inside, making sure not to damage any of the fragile items. With the box tucked under his arm, he hurried back to his car. his thoughts swirling. He didn't know exactly what he'd stumbled upon, but he knew one thing for sure. It was going to change everything. Back home, Daniel wasted no time contacting the local police department. When officers arrived at his door, he handed over the box and explained how he'd found it. Their faces turned pale as they sifted through the contents, especially when they recognized the name scrawled inside the journal. Within hours, news of the discovery spread like wildfire throughout Clearwater. For many residents, it was like reopening an old wound. Memories of the boy's disappearance flooded back, along with the grief and frustration that had never truly gone away. People gathered in groups, whispering about what this could mean. Was this evidence of what really happened? Could it finally bring closure to a case that had haunted the town for decades? Detectives jumped into action, treating the box like a treasure trove of clues. Forensic experts examined every item meticulously, looking for fingerprints, DNA, or anything else that might point them in the right direction. Meanwhile, reporters descended on Clearwater, eager to cover the story. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust into faces, and the town once again found itself at the center of attention. Amidst the chaos, the boy's mother learned about the discovery. Now, in her late 60s, she had spent nearly half her life wondering what had happened to her son. When detectives showed her the journal and other items, tears streamed down her face. She recognized the toy car instantly. It had been her son's favorite. The bicycle chain matched the one from the bike he rode the day he disappeared. These weren't just random objects. They were pieces of her child's life. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally come to light. But alongside that hope came a flood of emotions: sadness, anger, and even guilt. She wondered if she could handle hearing the full story, knowing it might confirm her worst fears. As investigators dug deeper into the contents of the box, they realized they were dealing with far more than just physical evidence. The journal in particular offered a glimpse into the boy's final days, a heartbreaking account of courage and resilience in the face of unimaginable fear. Each page revealed new details, drawing them closer to understanding what had happened all those years ago. Little did anyone know, this discovery was only the beginning. The box had opened a door to the past, but the journey to uncover the truth was far from over. Questions still lingered, shadows still loomed, and the forest, which had kept its secrets for so long, wasn't ready to give them up just yet. The journal found in the rusted metal box became the centerpiece of the investigation. It was fragile, its pages brittle and stained with age, but every word written inside carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. Detectives handled it carefully, as if they were holding not just paper but pieces of a soul, a child's desperate attempt to leave behind a trail. The entries were raw, unfiltered, and heartbreaking. They painted a vivid picture of what the boy had endured, offering glimpses into his thoughts, fears, and fleeting hopes. The first few pages described mundane details about his life before everything changed. He wrote about riding his bike, playing games with friends, and helping his mom around the house. These early entries felt almost normal, like something any kid might jot down in a diary. But as the detectives flipped further, the tone shifted, dramatically. The innocence faded, replaced by fear and confusion. One entry stood out in particular. It marked the beginning of his nightmare. He wrote about meeting someone he thought he recognized. This person seemed friendly, even familiar, and offered him candy. "They said they'd take me home through a shortcut," the journal read. The handwriting grew shaky here, as though the memory itself was hard to relive. "I didn't want to go, but they promised it would be faster. I got into their car and then, I don't know where we went." From that point on, the entries became darker. The boy described being taken to a place far away from home, a cabin deep in the woods. He talked about how cold it was inside, how dark and lonely. There were no windows, or at least none he could see. Chains rattled in the background, and strange noises kept him awake at night. His words were simple, but they conveyed a level of terror that sent chills down the spines of everyone reading them. "I'm scared," one entry admitted. "But I won't give up. I'll try to escape. Someone has to find me someday." Reading those lines broke hearts. Here was a child, alone and afraid, clinging to hope despite unimaginable circumstances. Each page revealed more attempts to fight back. In one passage, he mentioned hiding his bicycle chain so it couldn't be used against him anymore. "If anyone finds it, maybe they'll know I was here," he wrote. That single sentence connected directly to the discovery in the forest, tying the past to the present in a way that felt both eerie and profound. Other entries hinted at moments of defiance. He scribbled about scratching marks on the walls to count the days, though he wasn't sure how long he'd been there. Sometimes he wrote about hearing voices outside, people talking or cars driving by, and how he screamed for help, hoping someone would hear him. But no one ever came. The loneliness seeped through the pages, making it impossible to read without feeling a lump rise in your throat. As investigators pieced together the timeline, they noticed something else. The boy's writing style changed over time. At first, his sentences were short and clear, full of youthful optimism. But as the days or weeks passed, his handwriting deteriorated. Letters became jagged, words smudged, and entire passages trailed off mid-sentence. It was as if his strength was fading along with his hope. Yet even in his darkest moments, he refused to let go completely. "I still think about my mom," he wrote near the end. "She must be looking for me. I have to believe she is." For the team working on the Ophir case, the journal wasn't just evidence. It was a window into a tragedy that had haunted Clearwater for decades. Every detail mattered. They cross-referenced locations mentioned in the entries with maps of the area, trying to pinpoint where the cabin might have been. Some parts of the forest matched descriptions perfectly: dense trees, isolated paths, and old structures long abandoned. Others remained vague, leaving room for interpretation. One detective, a seasoned investigator named Laura, took the lead in analyzing the journal. She spent hours poring over the entries, highlighting key phrases and mapping out potential leads. Her colleagues joked that she knew the boy's story better than her own family history, but no one doubted her dedication. Laura had grown up in Clearwater herself, and like many others, she remembered the day the boy disappeared. For her, solving this case wasn't just about justice, it was personal. Laura's breakthrough came when she focused on a specific passage. The boy had described a tall oak tree near the cabin, its branches reaching high into the sky. He often looked at it through a crack in the wall, using it as a landmark. "If I ever get out," he wrote, "I'll follow the tree to find my way home." That description resonated with Daniel Harper's discovery, the massive oak tree where the metal box had been buried. Could it be the same one? If so, the cabin couldn't be far away. Armed with this new lead, the team expanded their search. They brought in drones equipped with cameras to scan the forest from above, looking for signs of human activity. Volunteers joined the effort, combing through areas that hadn't been explored in years. Local historians shared old maps and stories about forgotten cabins tucked deep in the woods. Slowly but surely, the puzzle began to come together. Meanwhile, the boy's mother waited anxiously for updates. She visited the police station daily, bringing coffee and snacks for the officers working on the case. Her gratitude was overwhelming, but beneath it lay a quiet desperation. She wanted answers, not just for herself, but for her son. "He deserves to be remembered," she told anyone who would listen. Not as a missing person, but as a brave little boy who never gave up. As the investigation gained momentum, the town of Clearwater rallied once again. Flyers with excerpts from the journal appeared alongside photos of the boy, reminding everyone why this case mattered. Conversations buzzed at diners and gas stations with people speculating about what might have happened. Some expressed anger, vowing to see justice served. Others simply prayed for closure, knowing it wouldn't undo the pain but might ease it slightly. Back at the station, the detectives worked tirelessly, driven by the knowledge that they were closer than ever to uncovering the truth. The journal had given them a roadmap, however fragmented. Now it was up to them to follow it, to walk the path the boy had walked, to see what he had seen and to ensure his voice was finally heard. Though the journey ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. The boy's story was no longer lost. It had been found, buried in the earth but alive in the hearts of those determined to honor him. The clues from the journal pointed investigators toward a specific area of the forest, a stretch of land thick with trees and nearly untouched by human activity. This part of the woods had always been remote, even back in the 1990s. It was the kind of place where people didn't go unless they had a reason to. For decades it had remained hidden, silent, and undisturbed. But now, thanks to the boy's words, it became ground zero for the investigation. Detectives, forensic experts, and volunteers fanned out across the area, searching for anything that matched the descriptions in the journal. Drones equipped with cameras buzzed overhead, capturing images of the dense canopy below. Officers on foot pushed through thorny bushes and muddy trails, their eyes scanning every inch of the terrain. The tall oak tree near where the metal box had been found served as a starting point, but finding the cabin wouldn't be easy. Nature had reclaimed much of the land over the years, swallowing old structures whole. After days of relentless searching, one of the drones captured something unusual, a faint outline of a roof barely visible beneath layers of vines and moss. It was tucked deep in the woods, far from any marked trail. When officers arrived at the site, they found what looked like the remains of an abandoned cabin. Its wooden walls were weathered and gray, almost blending into the surrounding trees. Windows were either boarded up or shattered, and the door hung crookedly on rusted hinges. It seemed forgotten by time, but there was no mistaking its eerie presence. Inside, the air was heavy with dampness and decay. The floorboards groaned underfoot as detectives stepped cautiously inside, flashlights cutting through the darkness. What they found chilled them to the bone. Chains dangled from hooks embedded in the walls, their metal links corroded but unmistakable. A makeshift bed lay in one corner, covered in rotting blankets and stained fabric. Empty cans of food and bottles littered the space, remnants of someone's attempt to survive or imprison another. But the most disturbing detail was the bloodstains. Faint but still visible, they marred the wooden planks in several places. Forensic teams immediately went to work, collecting samples and documenting everything. They combed through every inch of the cabin, looking for additional evidence. A hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, they discovered more chilling items. Polaroid photos of children, some smiling innocently, others looking scared, handwritten notes detailing methods of control and manipulation, and scraps of clothing that matched descriptions of what the missing boy had been wearing on the day he vanished. As news of the discovery spread, Clearwater braced itself for another wave of shock and grief. The town had already endured so much, but this felt different. This wasn't just a memory being dredged up, it was proof. Proof that the boy hadn't wandered off or run away. Proof that he had been taken, held against his will and subjected to horrors no child should ever face. And proof that whoever was responsible had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Investigators began piecing together the identity of the person behind the cabin. One name kept coming up: Harold Grayson. He was a handyman who had lived in Clearwater during the late 1990s, known for his quiet demeanor and odd behavior. Neighbors remembered him as someone who kept to himself, rarely interacting with others, unless necessary. He often worked odd jobs around town, fixing roofs, painting fences, doing whatever needed to be done. To most people, he seemed harmless, if a little strange. But when detectives dug deeper, cracks began to show in his seemingly ordinary facade. Grayson had left Clearwater shortly after the boy's disappearance, moving to another state. Over the years, he drifted from place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. Eventually, he died in a car accident, leaving behind little more than a few belongings and unanswered questions. When authorities searched his possessions, they uncovered disturbing materials, notes, photographs, and other items that suggested a pattern of predatory behavior. Though he could no longer be held accountable for his crimes, the evidence painted a grim picture of who he was and what he had done. For the boy's mother, learning about Grayson brought a mix of emotions. On one hand, she finally had answers. She knew her son hadn't disappeared because of carelessness or bad luck. Someone had deliberately taken him, and that knowledge, while devastating, offered a sense of clarity. On the other hand, the confirmation of such evil shook her to her core. She couldn't help but wonder how someone like Grayson had managed to live among them without raising suspicion. How many times had she passed him on the street? Had he ever smiled at her son? The thought made her sick to her stomach. The community shared her outrage. People gathered outside the police station, demanding justice. Not just for the boy, but for all the children whose lives had been stolen or ruined by predators like Grayson. Vigils were held in the boy's honor, with candles flickering softly. In the night, as residents stood shoulder to shoulder, united in their grief and determination to make sure nothing like this happened again, flyers with excerpts from the journal were posted everywhere, reminding everyone of the courage the boy had shown in the face of unimaginable fear. For Daniel Harper, the man who had stumbled upon the metal box, the developments hit close to home. He attended one of the vigils, standing quietly at the back of the crowd. Seeing the impact of his discovery reinforced why he loved exploring the woods in the first place, not just to uncover relics, but to connect with stories that mattered. "I didn't think I'd find something like this," he admitted to a reporter. "But I'm glad I did. If it helps bring closure to the family and the town, then it was worth it." As the investigation continued, the focus shifted from identifying the culprit to understanding the broader implications of the case. Detectives urged parents to talk to their kids about safety, emphasizing the importance of trusting instincts and speaking up if something felt wrong. Schools implemented new programs designed to educate students about recognizing signs of danger and seeking help. Volunteers formed neighborhood watch groups, determined to keep a closer eye on their communities. Though Grayson was gone, his actions cast a long shadow over Clearwater. The town grappled with the realization that evil could hide in plain sight, disguised as familiarity or kindness. Conversations grew louder, more urgent. People vowed to stay vigilant, to look out for each other, and to remember the boy who had fought so hard to survive. For the boy's mother, the journey wasn't over yet. While she appreciated the renewed attention to her son's case, she wanted more than just awareness. She wanted change, real, tangible change that would protect other families from experiencing the same pain. So she threw herself into advocacy work, partnering with local organizations to create resources for missing children and their loved ones. Her voice became a beacon of hope, urging others not to give up, even when the odds felt impossible. The cabin in the woods may have been discovered, but its secrets weren't fully unraveled yet. Each clue led to new questions. Each answer sparked fresh conversations. And though the boy's story had ended tragically, it inspired countless others to take action, to speak out, and to ensure that no child would ever have to endure what he did. His bravery lived on, not just in the memories of those who loved him, but in the changes his story helped spark. The discovery of the cabin and the evidence tied to Harold Grayson brought a mix of relief and heartbreak to Clearwater. For years, the town had carried the weight of unanswered questions about the boy's disappearance. Now, they finally had some answers, but those answers came with a heavy price. The truth wasn't just painful, it was infuriating. It forced people to confront the uncomfortable reality that someone they had lived alongside, someone who had seemed so ordinary, could harbor such darkness. Grayson's belongings told a chilling story. Among the Polaroid photos and handwritten notes were details that painted him as a master manipulator. He had studied his victims carefully, learning their routines, gaining their trust, and exploiting their vulnerabilities. Notes in his handwriting outlined strategies for luring children away, how to act friendly, how to offer small gifts or promises, how to avoid suspicion. To the outside world, he appeared harmless, even helpful. But behind closed doors, he was a predator, preying on innocence and vulnerability. Detectives spent countless hours piecing together the fragments of Grayson's life. They spoke to former neighbors, co-workers, and acquaintances, trying to understand how he had operated without raising alarms. Some recalled moments that, in hindsight, seemed suspicious. A child crying after an encounter with him, a car parked too close to a playground, a comment made in passing that didn't sit quite right. At the time, these incidents had been dismissed as coincidences or misunderstandings. No one had connected the dots until it was too late. For the boy's mother, hearing these revelations reopened old wounds. She replayed memories of her son's final days in her mind, searching for signs she might have missed. Had Grayson ever spoken to him? Had he smiled at him during one of those casual encounters? These questions haunted her, gnawing at her already fragile peace of mind. Still, she refused to let anger consume her completely. Instead, she channeled her emotions into action, determined to honor her son by ensuring no other family would suffer the same fate. The community rallied around her, offering support in ways both big and small. Neighbors brought meals to her house, friends sat with her during long nights, and strangers sent letters expressing sympathy and admiration for her strength. A local church organized a fundraiser to help cover the costs of ongoing advocacy efforts, and businesses donated supplies to create educational materials about child safety. The response was overwhelming, proof that even in the darkest times humanity could shine through. As news of the case spread beyond Clearwater, it sparked conversations nationwide. Journalists covered the story extensively, highlighting not only the tragedy but also the resilience of the boy's family and the town's determination to heal. Talk shows invited experts to discuss how communities could better protect vulnerable children. Social media buzzed with hashtags urging parents to stay vigilant and encouraging survivors to share their stories. What had started as a local mystery became a catalyst for change on a much larger scale. One of the most powerful voices in this movement belonged to Daniel Harper, the man who had found the metal box. Though he initially shied away from the spotlight, he eventually embraced his role in bringing attention to the case. He gave interviews, attended community meetings, and partnered with local organizations to promote awareness campaigns. His message was simple yet profound. Sometimes the smallest discoveries can lead to the biggest truths. Daniel emphasized the importance of curiosity and paying attention to details. "I didn't set out looking for anything like this," he often said. "I just followed my instincts and trusted that what I found mattered." We all have the power to make a difference if we're willing to look closer. His words resonated deeply with people, especially the younger generation. Students at the local high school formed a club dedicated to volunteering and spreading awareness about missing persons cases. They created posters, hosted events, and even launched a website where families could share information about loved ones who were still missing. Their enthusiasm inspired others to get involved, creating a ripple effect that reached far beyond Clearworld. Meanwhile, investigators continued working tirelessly to ensure every piece of evidence was accounted for. Forensic teams analyzed DNA samples collected from the cabin, cross-referencing them with databases in hopes of identifying additional victims. While the focus remained on solving the boy's case, authorities knew they might uncover connections to other crimes committed by Grayson over the years. Each new discovery added another layer to the grim puzzle, painting a clearer picture of the scope of his actions. Though justice couldn't be served directly to Grayson, he was dead after all, the legal system pursued accountability in other ways. Lawmakers introduced bills aimed at strengthening protections for children and increasing penalties for crimes involving abduction and exploitation. Advocacy groups pushed for reforms in law enforcement training, urging officers to take reports of suspicious behavior more seriously. Schools implemented mandatory programs teaching kids how to recognize danger and seek help when needed. In Clearwater, the transformation was palpable. Conversations that once centered on fear now focused on hope and action. Parents held open dialogues with their children, encouraging them to speak up if something felt wrong. Neighbors kept a closer eye on each other, fostering a renewed sense of connection and responsibility. Even the forest, once seen as a place of mystery and dread, began to feel less ominous. Volunteers cleaned up trails, planted trees, and installed signs marking safe routes for hikers. Slowly but surely, the town reclaimed its spirit. For the boy's mother, seeing these changes gave her a measure of comfort. She knew her son's life hadn't been lost in vain. His courage, preserved in the pages of his journal, had ignited a fire within the community, a fire fueled by love, determination, and a refusal to let evil win. Though she would never stop missing him, she found solace in knowing that his legacy would live on. Every year on the anniversary of his disappearance, the town gathered for a memorial event. Candles were lit, speeches were given, and songs were sung in his memory. Children released balloons into the sky, each one carrying a message of hope written on its surface. It was a day of reflection, remembrance, and renewal, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable loss, there is always light to be found. And so, the boy's story became more than just a cautionary tale. It became a call to action, a testament to the power of unity, and a celebration of the human spirit's ability to rise above adversity. The scars left by his disappearance would never fully heal, but neither would the lessons learned from his bravery. In the end, his voice, once silenced, had been heard louder than anyone could have imagined. The final chapter of this story wasn't about endings, it was about beginnings. Though the boy's life had been tragically cut short, his legacy sparked something extraordinary in Clearwater. The town transformed itself, not just in how it remembered him, but in how it chose to move forward. People didn't want to forget what had happened. They wanted to ensure that no one else would ever have to endure such pain. A year after the discovery of the journal and the cabin, the community unveiled a memorial park dedicated to the boy. It stood near the edge of the forest where the metal box had been found, close enough to feel connected to his story, but far enough to offer a sense of peace. The centerpiece of the park was a statue, a young child riding a bike, their face turned toward the horizon as if looking ahead with hope. Beneath it was a plaque engraved with words from his journal. "Even if I'm scared, I won't give up. Someone will find me someday." Every detail of the park was carefully chosen to reflect his spirit. There were winding paths lined with flowers, benches shaded by towering oak trees, and a small playground where kids could laugh and play freely. At the entrance, volunteers hung wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze, creating music that seemed almost alive. For many visitors, it felt like stepping into a place where sadness and hope coexisted side by side, a tribute not just to loss, but to resilience. The park quickly became a gathering spot for families, students, and anyone seeking solace or inspiration. On weekends, parents brought their children to teach them about the boy whose courage had changed the town forever. Teachers organized field trips so kids could learn firsthand about the importance of staying safe and speaking up when something feels wrong. Even tourists passing through Clearwater stopped to visit, drawn by the story behind the memorial and the message it carried. But the impact extended far beyond the park itself. Inspired by the boy's bravery, people across the country began taking steps to protect vulnerable children in their own communities. Advocacy groups formed networks to share resources and strategies. Law enforcement agencies revised protocols to prioritize reports of suspicious behavior involving minors. Schools adopted new curriculums focused on teaching kids how to recognize danger signs and seek help without fear. Slowly but surely, the ripple effect of the boy's story spread outward, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. For Daniel Harper, the man who had stumbled upon the metal box, the experience left an indelible mark. He continued exploring the woods, but his adventures took on a deeper purpose. Instead of simply searching for relics, he now looked for opportunities to make a difference. Whether it was organizing cleanup drives, leading educational workshops, or mentoring local youth, Daniel poured his energy into ensuring that the boy's memory inspired action rather than despair. He also stayed close to the boy's mother, forming an unlikely friendship rooted in shared grief and gratitude. Together, they traveled to conferences and events, sharing their story with audiences, eager to learn. Their bond served as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection and compassion could light the way forward. "I never imagined finding that box would change my life," Daniel often said during these talks. "But it taught me that every little thing matters, every clue, every conversation, every effort we make to care for each other." As time passed, the boy's mother found herself smiling more often. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared, it never truly would, but she had learned to carry it differently. She filled her days with meaningful work, dedicating herself to causes that honored her son's memory. From partnering with advocacy organizations to writing letters to lawmakers, she became a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Her strength inspired countless others to join the fight against exploitation and neglect. On quiet evenings, she still opened the box of mementos she kept at home. Inside were the photos, drawings, and trinkets that reminded her of her son, the toy car, the bicycle chain, the broken keychain. But now, alongside those items, she added new ones. Letters from strangers thanking her for her advocacy, drawings made by schoolchildren inspired by her son's story, and snapshots of the park where people gathered to remember him. Each object told a part of the journey, not just hers, but the town's and the world's. Clearwater, too, continued evolving. What had once been a sleepy town defined by its tragedy became a beacon of hope and progress. Residents celebrated milestones together. New laws passed, programs launched, and partnerships formed, all while keeping the boy's memory alive. Every October, on the anniversary of his disappearance, the entire community came together for a day of reflection and renewal. They lit candles, released balloons, and shared stories of how his courage had touched their lives. One particularly moving moment came when a group of high school students performed a play based on the boy's journal. Using his own words, they brought his story to life on stage, capturing both the fear he endured and the hope he clung to. The audience watched in silence, tears streaming down faces as they witnessed his struggle and resilience unfold before them. When the final curtain fell, the standing ovation lasted several minutes, a testament to the profound impact of his legacy. In the years that followed, Clearwater remained vigilant, committed to protecting its youngest members. The forest, once a symbol of mystery and danger, became a sanctuary where families felt safe exploring together. Trails were marked clearly, lighting was installed along popular routes, and regular patrols ensured everyone's security. Even the old cabin, though sealed off permanently, stood as a reminder of the town's past and its promise to build a better future. And yet, despite all the progress, the boy's story remained unfinished in some ways. His journal ended abruptly, leaving questions unanswered and hearts aching for closure. But perhaps that was fitting. Life, after all, is rarely neat or predictable. Sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that linger, urging us to keep asking, keep searching, and keep believing in the possibility of good triumphing over evil. So while the boy may have vanished physically, his presence endured in the laughter of children playing in the park, in the determination of advocates fighting for justice, and in the hearts of everyone who refused to let his memory fade. His bravery reminded the world that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, light can break through, if only we're willing to look for it. And in doing so, we honor not just his life, but the infinite potential within every child waiting to be seen, heard, and protected.